Hey everybody. So I'm gonna fill you in on where I've been for a while. So first I'm gonna walk outside and we'll look at the truck in the dark. So I had this grand idea that I wanted to fix a few things on the truck, and I don't even know if you can see anything, but I wanted to build kind of a roof rack type deal to extend my cargo capacity. And with the trailer that I made out of the other Dodge Ram, I wanted to do the same thing to that. So two tube frame setups. They would both run, about $250 for materials. But first we had a few things we knew we had to fix. Since I'm not doing the four-wheel drive swap yet, that means I have to do the bushings and ball joints for the front end, because they're all worn out and the steering is, well, horrific. And I knew there was something wrong with my third gear synchro, because if you were above like 300 RPMs trying to shift into third, it would grind, and you could not ever downshift into third no matter what. Well, I got under the truck and I discovered, I got under the truck and I discovered that when I drained the fluid out of the gear vendor, it was really bad. Also, the tail housing adapter that goes from the gear vendor, or from the back of the transmission to the gear vendor, had a crack in it. And I called gear vendor and they said, well, pretty much both of those units are a write-off. So I kind of freaked. I measured things out and I figured out that if I go ahead and do my conversion from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive as far as the drivetrain goes, I'll be about at the same length. I won't have to buy another drive shaft or anything. So we'll do that. Well, in the process of discovering all these things, I found out that my drive shaft had been rubbing my fuel tank. Turns out the carrier bearing's bad. Well, if you're going to do the carrier bearing, you better do the U-bolts too. Or universal joints, sorry. So, there's that. Alright, so if you're tuning in late, or may have missed the idea before, Project Franken Ram 3500 is my brainchild, and while it's not a crazy build, it's crazy for how I'm doing it. So, if any of you are aware of the second gen Dodge Rams, and I'm sure most people are, but anyway, you'll know that the unicorn out there is the 12 valve Cummins diesel with 4x4, etc., etc., all the fun stuff. Well, they're really hard to come by, and as every year passes, they're getting harder and harder to come by because they are getting super old. Mine is 27 years old, I believe. Anyway, even if you can find them and they're not all just big giant rust buckets, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars. Lots of money, and they're worth it. I don't have that kind of money. I don't know if I ever will, but anyway. I just happened to stumble across this one. The guy was asking, I believe it was about $75 for it, and I went to look at it, and it's wore out. It's got a little tiny bit of body damage, no rust to speak of. And it had issues here and there, so I talked him down to, I think it was $6,500. Since I bought it, I only put maybe 500 miles on it because I knew it needed work and I didn't want to push my luck too far. And sure enough, about 400 miles into that 500 miles, I started seeing clear signs of clutch problems. So it got parked. And here recently, my wife and I were talking about taking it on a trip across the country For one, because it's a diesel, and it'll have no problem moving some stuff around. It'll get decent mileage, and it's got the giant auxiliary tank in the back, so it would probably be one fill-up, you know, in the middle of the country on the way over there, maybe. Anyway, my wife asked me, how much do you think it'll take to get it roadworthy? And I had just spent, I think it was $1,400 or $1,500 on new tires, and they were not like top of the line tires, but this truck needs decent heavy duty tires just to haul its own weight around, let alone anything else. Anyway, I gave her a number, and she said, okay, see if you can do it for half of that. That's pretty much a normal thing between my wife and I with our conversations on how much it'll cost. So, I started taking things apart. I started with the drive shaft, and I realized the drive shaft has been rubbing the fuel tank. And kind of got to looking at things. Turns out all the rubber in the carrier bearing, or center bearing, depending on what you want to call it, was worn out. And so it was quietly slapping around inside there and moving far enough over to slap the plastic tank. Great combo, right? Well, if you're going to do the bearing, you better do the U-joints, because they're probably just as old. And turned out, the three that are in my drive shaft, I got a two-piece drive shaft. I had to cut them all out, because while I did get them to move a little bit, I could not get them to press out. So there was that fun joy. So I wasn't expecting to do any of that. So we're talking, I shopped around, and I did get all Spicer pieces. Yeah, Spicer are the ones that have been making stuff with Dana from the very start. Well trusted. So anyway, I went that route. If I had gone through a big company, like we'll say Torque King or Advanced Adapters or whoever, I would have been spending $300 alone just on that. I think I got it all for, that's 3 bearings, and hold on. So I did spend, well, technically I spent $300, but there's a little bit more to the story. That was 2 regular 1410 U-joints. I had to find a slip yoke because I did not have one. That was around $100. The carrier bearing and the 2 U-joints are Spicer. And then I got a new one on the market because my truck had a gear vendor. It no longer does because it's all burnt out, but the gear vendor, they have the techs modify the drive shaft to take a 1350 U-joint, which is significantly smaller than a 1410. And I couldn't find a yoke that took the 1350 bearing that would fit the NP 241 DHD. So I went with a standard yoke, and I got a conversion U-joint. I keep calling them U-bolt. A conversion U-joint that has 1410 on one side, 1350 on the other, so I can marry the two together. I'm gonna have to set this camera down. I apologize, I'm shaking all over the place. That's better. Yay! Okay. So if you didn't already know, one of the health issues I have is peripheral arterial disease. But it makes it real hard for me to hold my arms up. Okay. I think I was talking about the drive shaft. So anyway, took the drive shaft apart. Yes, took the drive shaft apart and realized I had to rebuild that. Then as we work up the line, like I said, gear vendor, toast. Tail housing, toast. The transmission, remember this all started because transmission, third gear synchro seemed like it was out. If you were over a couple hundred RPMs to shift into third, it would grind. If you were much higher on the scale, it would not let you go in while grinding. And you could never downshift into third. If you had to get to third, you would have to downshift to second, then try to go back up into third. That was my only indicator that something was off in the transmission itself. On closer inspection, yes, all the synchros are worn out. Matter of fact, the exterior synchro rings for first and second look like they need to be replaced, and possibly something more to do with third. I'm not quite sure. I need to get it tore down a little bit more. I have some more footage on the actual stuff inside the transmission there, but... So, long story short, it was going to cost me the same amount of money to rebuild it as a two-wheel drive as it would be to rebuild it as a four-wheel drive, because the only difference is the main shaft, or the output shaft, is shorter for the four-wheel drive. So I had already traded some other things for the NP241 DHD, the heavy-duty transfer case that's supposed to be for the 3/4 and 1 ton trucks, especially if they have the 12-valve Cummins. So I decided that I would just do the four-wheel drive rebuild kit for the transmission, get the tail housing for the transfer case to be able to bolt to, and when I ordered that stuff is when I realized that the transfer case the guy traded me was out of an automatic, which means the input shaft for the transfer case had the wrong spline count for my transmission. So I had to order a new input shaft for the transfer case. The good news is the transfer case, other than that input shaft situation, looks like it's in pretty good shape. I think it was rebuilt not too long ago. There are some signs of wear inside the case that don't match the parts, so I'm guessing things were worn out and they got rebuilt before. So I'll be able to just swap that shaft out, slap everything back together with some RTV. As long as it holds fluid, we're good to go. So, add in bushings. I am going to need 1 or 2 tie rod ends. I am going to need, or I already have the bushings and the ball joints, but I'm most likely going to need new brake hardware for the front. I have already ordered and received most of the drivetrain components. I think all I don't have so far is the additional synchro parts for the transmission. Budget-wise, I'm in about 4 times my initial assessment. And granted, that seems like, you know, a lot of money. However, if you were to buy any one of these units new, it'd be the same as its cost to order all of these parts to rebuild everything. So it's a huge difference in that sense of finances. Not to mention, it took 300,000+ miles for them to get to where they are now. So we're talking minimal investment to get, you know, potentially another 300,000 miles out of the same truck. Seems like a no-brainer to me, since most vehicles nowadays, trucks or not, don't even make it to 300,000 miles without major repairs. So anyway, over the next 2 weeks, we will be doing new oil retention gaskets, basically oil pan, front and rear main seals on the engine. The top side, they're pretty much new already. Gonna have to put a new oil line on the vacuum pump because it's leaking pretty good. That'll take care of the engine. Transmission is pretty much getting fully rebuilt without, you know, all new gears. It just needed the main gear, which comes with the new input shaft that I ordered. Transfer case doesn't need to be rebuilt, just needs the input shaft. And then the stuff for the driveline. All that needs to get put together, put through its paces, made sure it's roadworthy, plus the front end work for the bushings and tie rod ends, and then I'm going to have to take it in for an alignment. But hey, as long as I get the air conditioning fixed in the process, I'm good to go. So anyway, that's where we're at. That's where we're going to be. And in the coming weeks, I'll try to record as much of this stuff as I can. But for now, I'll just give you a little snapshot of what my workbench looks like. Transmission, transfer case, guts. Yay! This is the planetary gear that sits right inside the housing there. You pull that out, you pull this snap ring off right there. That comes out. There's two washers. They're basically spacers. Ow! Sorry, three. I think that's all. So there's the smaller shaft. Here's the bigger shaft. But they are roughly the same size as far as internals go. Set her in place. Does that matter? No, it's just the wicker. That's pretty much it. You just put the snap ring in. Yay! Okay, hold on, I got something in my shoe. We'll start over. Anyway,